for all of your work. I have been directed by the hostess to order everyone to stand up for 5 seconds.
Well done. Yes, good idea.
Still on?
We've had the theory of the law and the political science of law, and my job is to translate this into something more practical. And fortunately, a lot of what I need to say has already, in fact, already been said, so that my presentation will be brief, however long it takes. First of all, we've heard a lot about gerrymandering, and we've touched on some graphs. I like things a lot more simple to show how you can actually gerrymander without it being complicated. And here is an area that's obviously 40% red, 60% blue. Now you're going to draw districts. You can do it lengthwise. You end up with 2 red districts, 3 blue districts. Well, 40%, that seems fair. If you do it crosswise, where each district is 60% blue, red ends up with what? 0. Or you can, if you take the first 2 districts right here, you notice that the other 3 districts are 2/3 blue. Chop them up sideways, you end up with 3 red, 2 blue. If you want to really get fancy, if you assume this middle column is not all blue, but just a little teeny bit of red, you can have this one district, the one district here as a blue district, and the other looks 50-50. This is a little bit red. You got 3 districts, you got 4 districts, 51%. Red. So you can end up, if you're willing to take a chance, because you can win them all, you can also lose them all. So it's a question how greedy you want to be. If you want to be real greedy, if you notice these are like a little bit of red here, you can have 4 districts, 51% red. You could win red with 40%, ends up with 4 out of 5, or 0. Depending on how you draw the districts. And that's with straight lines. I also want to just, since I got a couple of political scientists here, put in a warning against trying to change the electoral college to the 5 congressional districts. So whoever wins the most, you get credit for each congressional district of Virginia +2 for carrying the states. It's not a matter of voters. You could end up with a 5 electoral college area. You could end up with red getting 2, 0, or almost 4. Voters don't have anything to do with it. So if people are thinking in terms of going that way, just be warned, these districts change every 10 years, and you would be in a situation where the map drawers would be actually electing the president, not the voters. So that's what you can do with straight lines, essentially straight lines. And if you have the additional advantage of going all kinds of different kind of ways, we've heard of the 12th district in North Carolina. My friend, Representative Vicky Bashaw, pointed out he's a representative and state representative who helped draw this district. Said if you go up Interstate 85 with both doors open, you kill everybody in the district. That was actually cited in the Supreme Court case. And there are other districts that Maryland's 3rd congressional district at one time. Texas is, these are actual congressional districts that people ran in. And so you can see what can be done. And this is what's happened to the 3rd district in 1992 to 93. It was run this way at a percentage of about 65% African Americans. 93, it was amended, took a little off the top, but essentially the same. Court threw it out and we ended up with something more compact. Now, the way they color this in is a little misleading. They really go to color in the river, and when you cover it in the river, the little bottom mark doesn't look so ridiculous. They redrew it again in 2011, and it stayed that way. 2012, they redrew this, and in 2015, the district here is about 55, 56% African American. That's when overpacking became illegal. And I had advocated since '92 that any district much over 48% African American was a violation of overpacking, and you really ought to have enough population to create two districts where the minority community would have a reasonable opportunity to elect a candidate of its choice. And so they redrew the third district just in Hampton Roads, and they colored in the river nicely for us. And so that looks like something reasonable. The African Americans that came out mostly in Richmond ended up in the 4th district, as Quentin indicated, and became a 40% district, a little over 40%. In terms of threshold, what you need to get elected, 40% was enough for a 16-year incumbent to run and not even try to run in that district. When Scott Ridgel said he wasn't running, he ran in the second. Unfortunately, got hit with carpetbagging allegations, and Scott Taylor beat him in a primary. But I think the important thing is, at 40%, a 16-year incumbent decided not to even bother. I had suggested those kind of numbers for 20 years, and finally they got it. If I had insisted on keeping a 55% African American district, Donald McEachin would still be in the state senate. Now, if you're looking for a threshold, you'd also notice that Newport News is about to see if African Americans can get elected at 40%. Newport News is about 40% in the last mayor's election. No white candidates bothered to run. The Voting Rights Act is interpreted, and Marcia said that the majority can block the minority. The language in the case is something to the effect of the majority usually blocks the minority from electing candidates of its choice. Now, what is usual? Well, you've got the mayor, you've got at-large council, school board. Gary Hunter ran without opposition. In constitutional offices, at-large, commissioner of revenue, commonwealth's attorney, and sheriff, all African-American, treasurer, clerk of court. As 3 out of 5 usual. Well, that's up for interpretation, but it's hard to imagine that at 40%, the minority community is not able to elect a candidate of its choice. And so one of the questions before us is, what is the threshold in which the minority community can elect a candidate of its choice? And one of the things the courts kind of allude to is traditionally been, you have to have an arithmetic majority. Over 50% of the minority population can be drawn into one district. That is, I think some of the Supreme Court justices are figuring out an absurd standard because it has to be locally calculated. In some areas, like the 4th District in Virginia, 40% is plenty. 16-year-old incumbents didn't even want to run in it. Others, particularly rural areas, particularly where they have not had a tradition of electing people, 60% might not be enough. You also have to note that you can change it over the course of history. If you have been able, if you needed 60% way back when, and then you have developed a tradition of electing people, where you have people that know how to work the precincts, you've got people in the community that know how to file financial reports, you got people that can give house parties, that can raise a couple of $1,000s to help the candidates. once you have the political infrastructure, maybe you don't need 60%. And so it has to be a continual recalculation. Also, whether or not your overall strategy is important. In Georgia v. Ashcroft, the question was whether districts that were mostly 60 and 70% African American in Georgia, you may have needed 60 and 70% districts way back when, but they were finding that that number was more than enough. They also calculated that if they diluted their districts a little bit, not so much as they'd lose, but just diluted it a little bit, that their adjoining Democratic colleagues could stay in office and they could stay in the majority. And the court decided that it should not be illegal to dilute a minority district so long as you don't eliminate it, if the strategy is to help Democrats get elected, because it is a reasonable strategy to look and see that you can remain chairs of committee, and if your Democratic colleagues lose, you will be in the minority, much less able to deliver for your constituents. And so the holding in Georgia v. Ashcroft is you could shave it to the bone, and maybe if that's the strategy, maybe be a little more aggressive than you would have in other cases. And so it's with that background that we look at what's going on the peninsula, because in the case that is now pending, Marcia prices and Joan Wood's districts are both over, I keep hitting something. Are both over 60% African American. And if you assume 40% is enough for an African American to win, let's just say they work them down, both of them, to 45%. Just in terms of getting to 50, you would need about half as much of the white vote to get to 50 as Donald McEachin needed when the 16-year incumbent didn't even want to try. You brought them both down to 45%. That would mean 15 percentage points African American leave those districts, but they don't disappear. The 91st district, Gordon Kelso, is 20%. David Yancey's district, 94th, is 23%. If you gave all 30 points to either one, you would have another majority African American district. If you split them up in two, it's unlikely that a Republican could win either of those districts with something well over 35% African American. That's why, as Quentin said, they're having trouble trying to figure out how to draw the districts, because it is, and if you take this south side and Richmond, it is difficult to imagine how you can get districts anywhere close to 45% and not create at least 8 or 9 additional Democratic districts, probably 3 or 4 or more African American districts. Of those 3 or 4 or more will be ones where African Americans will have a reasonable chance to get elected. Just like when the 3rd district was drawn down to about a 48, 49% district, creating another African American district, the Republicans in the General Assembly did not draw those districts. They noticed that if you draw an unbacked by district, that you would have to throw a Republican overboard, and rather than do that to themselves, they let the court do it. You're not going to have a map that will create 6, 7, 8 additional Democratic districts that a Republican legislature is going to draw. That's why the governor and the Speaker of the House, I think, have agreed that anything the House can pass, the governor is going to veto. And anything the governor would sign, the legislature can go pass. And so they're in a situation where I think both sides have agreed, just let the courts do and get it over with. We have to do it again in 2021. But that's why there is a impasse between the Democrats and the Republicans. And one final note, one of the problems in getting this done is that the law requires certain things to be done with the map. When legislators are drawing their own maps, the only district they're interested in is their own. And if they can get elected in their own district, they tend to ignore what happens in the rest. And so that's how you can get an illegal lines drawn, because everybody that's voting today has a district they can win, and then you look up and it's you have overpacked districts here and illegal districts there. That I think suggests that we'd be much better off with some kind of independent commission. You got to be careful about these independent commissions. How do you get on the commission? And if you get a lot of surrogates, politicians doing their boss's bidding, you're right back where you started from without the accountability. But some kind of independent map drawing is going to have to take place. Otherwise, we're going to be right back where we started. But we have the case is now pending. I suspect the courts are going to draw the lines for the 2019 House of Delegates elections. And if they do what they're supposed to do, it's going to be a much different looking legislature. Thank you.
If you have questions while we introduce Delegate Price, be sure to raise your hand, raise your questions so that we can get those in and make sure that we get those into the conversation. Finally, it's such a pleasure to introduce your host for today, Delegate Marcia Price of the 95th House District. She is a member of the Health, Welfare, and Institutions Committee, as well as the General Laws Committee. And I think we should all express our appreciation to Delegate Price for putting this together today. Delegate Price, thank you.
Great, thank you. So we were trying to make sure that we weren't duplicative in our presenting information, and it's working because I have some new things to add to the conversation. So I'm really glad that was able to happen. Before I jump in, I do want to recognize the mayor of Newport News, McKinley Price. Yes, we have Hampton City Councilman Steve Brown. Newport News City Councilman Dave Jenkins, and Newport News School Board Member Shelley Simons in the house. Awesome. So one of the other committees that I serve on that's listed in our bios is privileges and elections. And so this has been one of the most eye-opening experiences of my entire 3 years to go through the redistricting process, being on the committee and the subcommittee where this is actually happening. So if you are interested, I can send you some YouTube links so you can see previous meetings. And we have some friends here, and they described it as bickering. And I will take issue with that, but I'll tell you why. But to the common eye, it did look like we were children fighting over things. But let me put that into some context. There, like was mentioned in Virginia, we have been, some of us have been fighting for redistricting reform because, as has been on full display, this process is not working, right? And some of those included since 2002. I think the number that I just said was 90 bills. Since 2002, 90 bills have been presented for redistricting reform, and none of them have passed, okay? And they were on topics like the Independent Redistricting Commission that we've heard about, but then also redistricting criteria. So what does that mean? I will let you know about what we were able to do in 2017. I worked with some civil rights groups, and I presented a House Joint Resolution 696, and it was about what can be done in the redistricting process. A small note, it's HJ instead of HB because it was a proposed constitutional amendment, okay? And the process for that is a resolution has to be passed in the second year, during one General Assembly. Then there's an election, And then the next General Assembly has to pass it again, same language. And then it'll show up on the November ballot for the people to vote on. So that process worked for two proposed constitutional amendments that will be on your ballot November 6th. So if that is news to you, see me after, we can talk, but that's the process. So it passes the General Assembly twice. So this was the first attempt for us to get this done. And what it did was it basically made political gerrymandering against the rules, incumbent protections against the rules, but then also candidate protection. So there were times when they were drawing maps to make sure that somebody that they wanted to run for a seat was in a district, even though that person wasn't even an incumbent yet. So that was all addressed in the first point. The second point was, we have talked about the Voting Rights Act. And what it tried to do was get the explicit language of the Voting Rights Act codified into our Constitution. So if anything should happen on the federal level to the Voting Rights Act, because people are steady coming for it every day, it would still be in the Virginia Constitution. So we wouldn't have to necessarily worry about our friends like Congressman Scott and all of the defense he's trying to play in DC. And then the third thing that is really, really important to me, I do want to correct something the fine gentleman Quentin Kidd said. The rooms are no longer dark. We hide in well-lit rooms with our computers now. So that's the only thing I would change for him. But we did. We went to our own camps. We tried to come up with something. There was a legislator that said he didn't know how to get in touch with me because he didn't have my phone number. And I'm like, I have 4 phone numbers that are publicly published. So it is very tribal. It's very partisan. But then the third point that this proposed constitutional amendment would have done was make communications about the redistricting process public record. And so you would be able to find out, what did Delegate Press say? What did Delegate Ward say? What did Delegate so-and-so say? Because those would be, and it would include our legislative assistants as well. Shout out to Tempest Boone, our legislative assistant there. But it would include, those communications too, so your LAs are talking to each other on our behalf. All of that would be public record. That did not make it out of subcommittee. But that's what we're talking about here. This is so common sense to me that I didn't understand, and then I did understand because more of the process played out. So then in 2018, what I did was, because it wasn't the year for proposed constitutional amendments, I tried to get 2 of the 3 things that I was going for in a law. Now, the third thing about it being public record, that would actually have to change the Constitution, so that was outside of the scope of legislation. But I tried to make political gerrymandering and illegal, and then put in the Voting Rights Act language. And that was in 2018, HB 616. That did not make it out of my committee. I made a really good argument for it too. I don't know about my research. But anyway, so there was another bill that was put out that addressed this thing called criteria, and that was House Bill 1598. And it's a lot of words, and it's like redistricting reform, yay, and people were fighting for it, and they thought it was great, and I was like, yeah, that don't say anything. It was a lot of words, but it didn't say anything. It didn't make political gerrymandering illegal. It did not enshrine the Voting Rights Act language, it just references it. So if someone was successful in completely gutting the Voting Rights Act, that's just 3 words on a piece of paper. Instead of putting the language in there, and then of course, number 3 was nowhere mentioned because public record, that's shining light on the process. So that is why I believe the governor vetoed it, and when he gave his rationale, he said he supports codifying the criteria for drawing the legislative process, right? But he thinks that the redistricting must explicitly state the VRA protection, and he believes that the criteria should also prohibit the things that we were trying to accomplish in HB 616. And so the governor vetoed the bill, so it did not become law. And so then, and here's a little bit of a timeline that we have. And this is what you have been seeing in the news more recently. So June 26th, that's when the order came from the district court that found the 11 districts unconstitutional. And then August 20th, the governor called us into special session for August 30th, okay? So we all get to Richmond August 30th, and the Democrats introduced HB 7001 in the Privileges and Elections Committee meeting. There was no vote. And then we were called back to a Privileges and Election meeting on the 27th of September, and that's where House Bill 7003 was introduced. And I'm going to get into a little bit of that, but I just want you to see how it's been unfolding. So then, after the House Bill 7003, what's been called the Republican map, was passed out of committee on a party line vote, the date was set for us to go in on Sunday, October 21st, 9 days before our deadline to have a map into the court. And then the governor said, okay, let me just give you a heads up before we spend taxpayer dollars bringing everybody back in. I'm going to veto an unconstitutional map. And then that's when the floor session was canceled, and then now we wait. And so all of the things that have been mentioned that could happen, that's how we got to this point of now they're looking for a special master, the court, it could be drawing the maps and everything. So let me tell you what that means for me. I do not know if my address is going to be in the 95th district after the map gets drawn. Juwan Ward does not know. But even though that's what's been talked about in the news, that's not what's most important. And so that's what I want to talk about now. What is most important is what is best for getting to a point where all Virginians' votes matter equally. And that is not the case when you have African Americans packed into different districts. So people ask me, did you vote against 7003 just because you're a Democrat? And my resounding answer is no. So I want to publicly state what those reasons were so that you can kind of understand what is happening in Richmond. So let's see, this is the current enacted map. And the green, as has been pointed out, is the 95th district, which most of it is in Newport News, but it kicks out into 3 precincts, that little elbow, that's what goes into Hampton. The district to the left is the 94th district, currently represented by David Yancey. The bright yellow is the 92nd district, currently represented by Juwan Ward. And then the purple is the 91st district, which is currently represented by Helsel. Now, sometimes you'll hear us call our districts like our district. No, I don't own it, but some people in my district do not know that they're in the 95th, but they know I'm the representative. So if I do slip up and say my district, it's so that you understand which color, not because I'm claiming ownership. The residents and citizens of the 95th own it. So here is how the changes would happen to the proposed 7001. Okay, so that's today, and then that's 7001. Okay, and this unpacks African Americans, and just for instance, the percent African American for the 95th district went from like 61% to 53%. And it goes up further on the lower bottom side, so it went to like River and some of those areas. So that's where some of the changes were made. And Carver and Briarfield went to the 94th. So in those terms, y'all, be thinking, okay, it's like trading. I need to get rid of some African Americans, and I need to give me some Caucasians. It literally is that crass, because that's how, you know, the exchange is happening. So this is the proposed 7001, which is often called the Democratic bill, okay? So then this is the proposed 7003. Now, the changes at the top of where the green are, that takes the 95th district significantly into Hampton, more than just the current 3 precincts. But I want you to also look at the top at where that purple goes. The 91st district, held by Delegate Helsel, comes into Newport News. Newport News would get 4 delegates in order to make these changes. So here is the map that everybody was wondering why I voted against, and here it is. So when you sit down at a table and you're about to negotiate, you list out your terms. Like, these are the terms for negotiation. Point number 4, for my colleagues across the aisle, they said that there should be no change in partisan makeup with the remedial map. African Americans vote more than 90% for one party. If you're unpacking districts, it just reasons that there would be some more Democratic people being dispersed. So that it just seems like there would be some change in party. So for me, that was a non-starter. It was not in the court order, and it's not in the Constitution. There's no reason why that has to be the case. And to give you an example, between the yellow and the green, 8,000 and about 500 African Americans were being unpacked between 95th and 97th, more than 8,000. In this version of the map, not one African American from 8,500 was put into the 94th district. When I asked the question, it was stated very clearly, because that race was so close that a name was picked out of a bowl. We didn't want to move any into the 94th. Okay, so point number 2, it is unconstitutional. This map is unconstitutional. The court order said unpack African Americans. There are 2 districts that in this map, they're not shown on this map because I honed in on the peninsula. There are 2 districts that were part of the 11 where their percent African American actually went up. That is the opposite of what the court asked for. And so point number 3, something that I want not to be lost when we're talking about percentages, it's not just about getting to a magic number. It is about voting power. So if you unpack African Americans, but put them into districts that are already supporting Democrats, you have not actually increased the voting power of the African Americans. And I am speaking for me, not for any other panelists right now. This is Delegate Price coming to you straight. But it is important where African Americans are unpacked to. Okay? Everybody with me? So that does not fix the unconstitutional map that we are under today that diminish the voting power of African Americans. Point number 4, race neutral. Anybody else get scared when somebody says race neutral? That is the erasure of African American people in my mind. But basically they were saying that they did not use race data at all while drawing a map. And the problem that I have with that is race data was used to surgically draw the Denby precinct, Epps, and Reservoir into split precincts clearly along African American streets. And if you're in those, or if you've ever walked them and knocked doors, or if you know those areas, it is so absolutely clear that it was done on a race basis. Why would you not then use racial data to correctly undo that, right? And so as Marcia mentioned, it doesn't say that you can't, it just says don't do what you did. Well, no, that's not what it says. It says you cannot use it as the predominant factor, right? So to say that we need a race neutral map in 2018, that should be a red flag. And then my last point is that 7003 maintains the status quo of today. Thousands of African Americans are unpacked from districts, but it maintains the ill-gotten, unconstitutional map under which the current majority was gained. So why should we have another election under another unconstitutional map? So when I think that out and I see the numbers, I see the gains, I was a no. It wasn't because I'm a Democrat, it is because they might forget. I'm an African-American Virginian who wants her vote to equal that of my colleagues that live in other areas. And so that is why I got there. But a point on the bickering. I get it. You guys are watching from YouTube or these links, you just see a bunch of people sitting up front and it's like, it sounds crazy, right? But the thing that I don't want to do to belittle the conversation is what's at stake. What is truly at stake? And it's not whether or not I can win my race in my district. It's not whether or not this other incumbent is going to be safe because they don't feel like doing what they need to do to outreach to Black folks. But it is very hard to play nice with people who are strategically trying to continue the oppression of the African-American voice through trying to diminish their voting power. So if you thought a poll tax was wrong, you should think a racial gerrymander is wrong. And so that's why this is so significant. This is some deep history that I have connected in my DNA. And so I will not sit by, and sometimes, yes, I get a little passionate about it, but that's just because of what's at stake. And so just want to let you all know that part. But that is kind of what's going on here. And that's what's going on in Richmond. Now, so that's what was drawn by the people that have something at stake, right? So what was drawn by the non-legislators? That would be one of these. This is the new Virginia majority map that was drawn specifically and transparently using racial data to undo what was done. And you'll find that the 95th district in this map is actually in all of Newport News. So the changes between the 95th and the, in order to get it right, were between the 95th and the 94th. And then the 92nd and the 91st, they did their exchanges to get their changes done. So it can happen. And this, the voting, the African-American percentage in this map across the state was closer to the 47 to 45%. And then there was another group that drew one, and that's the Princeton Gerrymandering Project, and this is called the Reform Map. And the green is at about Palmer in Newport News, and then down to the Southeast community for the 95th. And then there were significant changes to the 94th as it being the north part of Newport News, black and white, both sides, but it was a north-south split versus a east-west split of the district, of the city. So this just goes to show you that if somebody's drawing a map that doesn't have the same personal investment in it. Now, everybody has an investment. It would be wrong to say that nobody has an investment unless they just lived outside of Virginia, right? But even then, you would have a political investment. So there's that, but a much less significant political and personal interest in the process. So what's important about 2019? So we've gone over the past, we've gone over the present. What is significant about the future? What did I say about the constitutional, the proposed constitutional amendment process? It has to pass 2, right? If we want to change the rules under which the 2021 map is going to be drawn, those rules have to be passed for the first time in 2019. Everybody here. So between January and February, Delegate Ward, Senator Locke, and I need to go back and significantly fight for our laws and rules to be changed so that we can have a more fair process for the 2021 redistricting. And that's based off the Senate. So what will that take? It will take you. As was stated, we are at, the people that want the reform do not have the majority in the current composition of the General Assembly. But guess what 2019 also is? Election year. Things change during election year when 300 Virginians descend on the Capitol and say, we want redistricting reform. There are several organizations that are doing those kinds of organizing efforts that I hope you will plug into and make sure that your voice is heard. If you care about the voting power of African Americans and minorities moving into generations. And I say that not just to the Black people. Hello. The entire room should care because that is a more fair and more just Virginia. All right. So now I'm going to turn it over and go take my seat, and we are going to take some questions.
Thank you, ma'am. I don't need that. All right, I know we are a little bit over our committed time, so we will take a couple of questions. Can we get some of those questions up here? One thing I want to get each of you to weigh in on, because we talked a lot about getting engaged in the process. What specifically would that look like? I mean, what would it look like when we say engage this process?
I'm sorry, Professor Lewis, we were talking.
All right, 4 credit hours for all of us. The question is, each of you has said some variation of, we need to engage the citizens of the Commonwealth, need to engage this process because it's so important. So what specifically would engaging the process look like?
I think whatever governmental body is in charge of the redistricting process, they will probably produce a schedule of public meetings. And so, of course, one of the things that you can do is show up to the public meetings and find out what's going on. At a different level, since I come from that background, develop your own plan. You become familiar with the process, the redistricting process, and try to develop your own plan. As I said, this time, just like last time, there'll probably be web-based free web-based software. Find the technical person if you're not inclined to do so. Sit down with them and draw your own plan and bring it to the meeting and tell people why you think this is the district, and it doesn't have to be an entire plan. It could be a district that you advocate for. Here's the reason why I favor this district, why I think this district is fair. So those are 2 things that come to mind.
Anybody else want to comment on that?
Yeah, I would suggest you also join different groups that are advocating for one thing or another. It's one thing for an individual to come and testify. It's another thing for an organization to be represented, and so that you could say that the entire organization is in favor of it. It conveys a message that there may be political implications if you don't do what they say, because these people in the organization presumably will be voting after you vote. And so empowering those organizations also means that you will have resources. A number of different groups, Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, for example, have the capability of doing the maps. What is the software? And you'll be able to present as a representative of a group, not just yourself.
Just to throw a couple of thoughts in also. Let me just emphasize again how important it is to go to these public meetings. In 2011, I was advising the governor's advisory commission on redistricting, and there were 5 public hearings held around the state. And I'm a political scientist. I should have thought better than this, but I had often thought of public meetings as just sort of public displays. They really didn't have an impact on what people thought. But after those 5 meetings, sitting in those commission meetings that were public, but people weren't really there, I was struck at how many times the commissioner would say, well, if you remember when we were in Norfolk, we had, 18, and one commissioner in particular pulled out notes and said we had 36 people say they were most interested in compact and contiguous districts. In other words, they wanted representatives to live in their city. And so that stuff really does matter. I mean, when you go to these public hearings and you say, look, I'm really concerned about something, it does get through. And that does find its way to the decision-making process, and especially if a lot of people go and say the same thing, it really makes its way to that decision-making process.
Yeah, lastly, what I would add is start having the conversations within your community about what you would want to see, so that when you participate in the public meetings, you have a unified voice, and you've thought through the process of doing the illustrative maps, what you want your districts to look like.
Delegate President, just a minute. Why didn't Democrats have a map in House Bill 7001? If communications about redistricting should be public, why didn't Democrats use a more transparent process?
So I can't really give you a satisfactory answer, but the way that it was done is currently what I wish is to make it become public. So I did not want to imply that there was anything that was done that was nefarious on either side. But that is not just, it's not the rules right now. And I think that the distrust that there is for each side kind of gets us going back to our camps. But I mean, just like my address, not being known, or, these games that it looked like. So if we're always attacking each other, you don't show the other person your hand. And that is just, I think, the system that we have there, which I think is another point why an appropriate independent redistricting commission is the right way to go.
We are, first of all, you again, this has been a very complex conversation, and congratulations for hanging in there, and congratulations for caring enough to show up in 2018 for something that's going to be very important in succeeding years. So, Delegate Price, did you want to thank folks for coming, or?
Are there any more questions? Okay, so let me just get a temperature check. And everybody close your eyes. Raise your hand if you needed a primer before this meeting. If you needed it broken down even a little bit more. Okay. All right, thank you. Now raise your hand if you learned something new today that was helpful. Okay, great. All right, everybody open your eyes. Thank you, that was very helpful. I just, one last call for questions. I know we're over time, but I really, we won't be congregated in this same way in another time. So I just want to make sure we have experts here who hopefully have a couple of minutes that can stay and answer questions in case you're a little shy. But yes, I do want to offer an opportunity for any of our panelists if they have something that wasn't mentioned, a burning desire to make a statement for the good of the order.
Yeah, I want to thank our hostess for bringing us together and having a intelligent discussion on this feasibility. Starting with the law that we're dealing with, the practical applications, how all of this actually results in different kinds of districts and different kinds of fairness and basic democracy in a format that people can actually understand. So I'd like to give Marcia a round of applause.
Yes. And I would like to thank you all. So I have a token of my appreciation for your time and effort today, and for being so amazing in your own respective ways and taking time to come here today. I do want to recap very briefly what we heard for next steps. One thing that I would add to that, reapportionment in 2021 will be done based off the census. There are several areas that are counted as undercounted, that are hard to reach. And so we'll be calling on community organizations to help us with that. Join a group that's already doing the advocacy. You do not have to reinvent the wheel, especially if you cannot even talk about the wheel just yet, because you're still learning. Join a group, they'll help you. Also, financial support for the organizations that are fighting these cases. It is not free. They do not work for free. You can financially support the organizations that are fighting on the side for which you are there. Also, you can make this a campaign issue in 2019. Ask your representative, where do they stand on it? And then also, of course, come to Richmond in order to fight for the changes that we have, that we want to happen in 2019. And just three brief announcements. Tomorrow is the voter registration deadline for Virginia. If it is a physical paper application, the deadline is 5 o'clock. If it's online, it's 11:59. If you need to update or register, I will be here with my laptop. We can do it online if you have a DMV issued ID. And then, of course, election day is November 6th. This election is important. I will not say anything else. And then also stay tuned for Medicaid expansion information. In order for Medicaid expansion to succeed, we need high rates of enrollment, and the people have the need. Let's connect them to the resource. We'll need community organizations and citizens to help with that. Thank you so much for your time.